curiosity, more easily shot than any other deer of the plains. May we not gently suggest to the reader for his or her consideration that there are human antelopes, so to speak, whose case bears a striking resemblance to the pronghorn of the North American prairie? Dick's horse was no match for the antelope, neither was Crusoe, so they pulled up shortly and returned to their companions to be laughed at.
"It's no manner o' use to wind your horse, lad, after sich a game. They're not much worth, and, if I mistake not, we'll be among buffalo soon. There's fresh tracks everywhere, and the herds are now scattered. You see, when they keep together in the bands of thousands, you don't so often fall in with 'em. But when they scatters about in twos and threes and sixes, you may shoot them every day as much as you please."
Several groups of buffalo had already been seen on the horizon, but as a red deer had been shot in a belt of woodland the day before, they did not pursue them. The red deer is very much larger than the prong-horned antelope, and is highly esteemed both for its flesh and its skin, which latter becomes almost like chamois leather when dressed. Notwithstanding this supply of food, the hunters could not resist the temptation to chase to a herd of about 9 buffaloes that suddenly came into view as they overtopped an undulation in the plain. "It's no use," cried Dick. "I must go at 'em." Joe himself caught fire from the spirit of his young friend, so calling to Henri to come on and let the pack horse remain to feed, he dashed away in pursuit. The buffalo gave one stare of surprise, and then fled as fast as possible. At first it seemed as if a huge unwieldy carcass could not run very fast, but in a few minutes they managed to get up a pace that put the horses to their mettle. Indeed, at first it seemed as if the hunters did not gain an inch, but by degrees they closed with them, for buffaloes are not long-winded. On nearing the herd, the 3 men diverged from each other and selected their animals. Henri, being short-sighted, naturally singled out the largest, and the largest, also naturally, was a tough old bull. Joe brought down a fat young cow at the first shot, and Dick was equally fortunate, but he well nigh shot Crusoe, who, just as he was about to fire, rushed in unexpectedly and sprang at the animal's throat, for which piece of recklessness he was ordered back to watch the pack horse. Meanwhile, Henri, by dint of yelling, throwing his arms wildly about, and digging his heels into the side of his long-legged horse, succeeded in coming close up with the bull, which once or twice turned his clumsy body half round and glared furiously at his pursuer with its small black eyes. Suddenly it stuck out its tail, stopped short, and turned full round. Henri stopped short also. Now the sticking out of a buffalo's tail has peculiar significance, which is well to point out. It serves, in a sense, the same purpose to the hunter that the compass does to the mariner. It points out where to go and what to do. When galloping away in ordinary flight, the buffalo carries his tail like ordinary cattle, which indicates that you may push on. When wounded, he lashes it from side to side, or carries it over his back, up in the air. This indicates, "Look out! Haul off a bit." But when he carries it stiff and horizontal, with a slight curve in the middle of it, it says plainly, "Keep back, or kill me as quick as you can," for that is what Indians call the "mad lazy," and is a sign that mischief is brewing. Henri's bull displayed the "mad tail" just before turning, but he didn't observe it, and accordingly waited for the bull to move and show his shoulder for a favorable shot. But instead of doing this, he put his head down, and, foaming with rage, went at him full tilt. The big horse never stirred. It seemed to be petrified. Henri had just time to fire at the monster's neck, and the next moment was sprawling on his back, with the horse rolling over 4 or 5 yards beyond him. It was a most effective tableau. Henri rubbing his shins and grinning with pain, the horse gazing in affright as he rose trembling from the plain, and the buffalo bull looking on half stunned, and, evidently, very much surprised at the result of his charge. Fortunately, before he could repeat the experiment, Dick galloped up and put a ball through his heart. Joe and his comrades felt a little ashamed of their exploit on this occasion, for there was no need to have killed 3 animals. They could not have carried with them more than a small portion of one, and they upbraided themselves several times during the operation of cutting out the tongues and other choice portions of the two victims. As for the bull, he was almost totally useless, so they left him as a gift to the wolves. Now that they had come upon the buffalo, wolves were often seen sneaking about and licking their hungry jaws. But although they approached pretty near to the camp at nights, they did not give the hunters any concern. Even Crusoe became accustomed to them at last, and ceased to notice them. These creatures are very dangerous sometimes, however, and when hard pressed by hunger will even attack man. The day after this hunt the travelers came upon a wounded old buffalo, which had evidently escaped from the Indians, for a couple of arrows were sticking in its side, only to fall prey to his deadly enemies, the white wolves. These savage brutes hang on the skirts of the herds of buffaloes to attack and devour any one that may chance, from old age or from being wounded, to linger behind the rest. The buffalo is tough and fierce, however, and fights so desperately that although surrounded by 50 or 100 wolves, he keeps up the unequal combat for several days before he finally succumbs. The old bull that our travelers discovered had evidently been long engaged with his ferocious adversaries, for his limbs and flesh were torn in shreds in many places, and blood was streaming from his sides. Yet he had fought so gallantly that he had tossed and stamped to death dozens of the enemy. There could not have been fewer than 50 wolves round him, and they had just concluded another of many futile attacks when the hunters came up, for they were ranged in a circle round their huge adversary, some lying down, some sitting on their haunches to rest, and others sneaking about, lolling out their red tongues and licking their chops as if impatient to renew the combat. The poor buffalo was nearly spent, and it was clear that a few hours more would see him torn to shreds and his bones picked clean. "Ugh! de brutes!" ejaculated Henry. "They don't seem to mind us a bit," remarked Dick, as they rode up to within pistol shot. "It'll be merciful to give the old fellow a shot," said Joe. "Them varmints are sure to finish him at last." Joe raised his rifle as he spoke, and fired. The old bull gave his last groan and fell, while the wolves, alarmed by the shot, fled in all directions. But they did not run far. They knew well that some portion, at least, of the carcass would fall to their share, so they sat down at various distances all around to wait as patiently as they might for the hunters to retire. Dick left the scene with a feeling of regret that the villainous wolves should have their feast so much sooner than they expected. Yet, after all, why should we call these wolves villainous? They did nothing wrong, nothing contrary to the laws of their peculiar nature. Nay, if we come to reason upon it, they rank higher in this matter than man; for while the wolf does no violence to the laws of its instincts, man often deliberately silences the voice of conscience, and violates the laws of his own nature. But we will not insist on the term, good reader, if you object strongly to it. We are willing to admit that wolves are not villainous, but assuredly they are unlovable. In the course of the afternoon the three horsemen reached a small creek, the banks of which were lined with a few stunted shrubs and trees. Having eaten nothing since the night before, they dismounted here to feed, as Joe expressed it. "Cur'ous thing," remarked Joe, as he struck a light by means of flint, steel, and tinder box. "Curious thing that we're made to need sich a lot of grub. If we could only get on like the sarpents, now, wot can breakfast on a rabbit, then wait a month or two for dinner. Ain't it cur'ous?" Dick admitted that it was, and stooped to blow the fire into a blaze. Here Henry uttered a cry of consternation, and stood speechless with his mouth open. "What's the matter? What is it?" cried Dick and Joe, seizing their rifles instinctively. "De grub him be forgot." There was a look of blank horror, and then a burst of laughter from Dick Varley. "Well, well," cried he, "we've got lots of tea and sugar and some flour. We can get on with that till we shoot another buffalo, or aha!" Dick observed a wild turkey stalking among the willows as he spoke. It was fully 100 yards off, and only its head was seen above the leaves. This was a matter of little moment, however, for by aiming a little lower he knew that he must hit the body. But Dick had